alarm as 2 days passed without any sign of his beloved friend. He summoned his son and ordered him to investigate Rajatarman's disappearance. The prince set out with a group of Rakshasas racing through the forest with great speed. As they approached the banyan tree, they discovered the remains of Rajatarman, a gruesome sight that filled their hearts with sorrow. The Rakshasas quickly tracked down Gautama and brought him back to Maruvraja, where they presented him to Virupaksha alongside the mutilated body of his friend. The king's grief was overwhelming as he beheld the remains of Rajatarman. His counselors and priests joined in his lamentation, their voices echoing through the city as the people mourned the loss of their beloved Burdus. The news spread. The Rakshasas were torn between their desire for revenge and their sense of duty. Many refused to eat the flesh of Gautama, deeming him too sinful to be consumed. Instead, they begged Virupaksha to let them give the Brahmana red to the robbers who ruined the forest. The king agreed, and the Rakshasas hacked Gautama into pieces, handing him over to the cannibals. However, even these hardened individuals refused to eat the flesh of an ungrateful person like Gautama. They too recognized that there was no expiation for one who had injured a friend and become ungrateful. In the end, it was not the worms or the carrion birds that devoured Gautama's remains, but the very earth itself, absorbing his wickedness into its depths.
In a land far away, a tale of friendship and loyalty was unfolding. The mighty Rakshasa King Virupaksha had lost his dear friend Rajatarman. The Prince of Cranes, grief-stricken Virupaksha, ordered the construction of a grand funeral pyre adorned with precious jewels, gems, perfumes, and costly robes. As the flames engulfed the pyre, the Rakshasa King's heart was heavy with sorrow, but fate had other plans. The auspicious goddess, Shurafai, daughter of Daksha, appeared in the sky above. The pyre, her breasts were full of milk, and from her mouth flowed a frothy mixture of milk and nectar that fell upon Rajatarman's body miraculously. The Prince of Cranes began to stir, rising up from the ashes like a phoenix. As Rajatarman approached his friend Virupaksha, the chief of the celestials, Indra descended upon the city. He praised Virupaksha for reviving his dear friend and recounted the ancient tale of the curse that had befallen Rajatarman. According to legend, the grandsire Daksha had cursed the Prince of Cranes for absenting himself from a sacred assembly. That curse had been broken by the nectar that had flowed from Shurafai's mouth. Rajatarman, now revived, begged Indra to grant his friend Gautama, who had slain him with an arrow, a second chance at life. Moved by Rajatarman's words, Indra sprinkled nectar upon Gautama, restoring him to life. The Prince of Cranes was overjoyed to be reunited with his friend, and the load of gold he had carried on his shoulders. Together they returned to their abodes, but not before Rajatarman visited the grandsire's region, where he was welcomed as a honored guest. However, Gautama's fate was sealed. He would soon succumb to a terrible curse for his sinful deeds. The gods decreed that he would be born into a Subra family and father many more children, only to suffer a gruesome fate in the underworld. Bhishma, the wise storyteller, had heard this tale from Narada and now shared it with Yudhishthira. As Bhishma concluded his story, he emphasized the importance of gratitude and loyalty towards friends. He warned that an ungrateful person would never find happiness or peace, while the friend who was injured could sink into eternal hell. Yudhishthira listened intently, his heart filled with reverence for the tale of friendship and loyalty. As Bhishma finished speaking, Yudhishthira felt grateful for the lesson he had learned from the story.
The sun was setting over the kingdom, casting a warm orange glow over the land. Yudhishthira, the eldest of the Pandava brothers, sat at the feet of his grandsire, Bhishma, seeking guidance on how to navigate the complexities of life. Grandsire Yudhishthira said, "You have spoken of the duties of kings and those who lead a life of asceticism. But what about us who walk the middle path? What are our duties in this world?" Vishwa's eyes twinkled with wisdom as he began to speak. "Religion has many doors, my child," he said. "Each one leads to its own reward. But only through self-control and reflection can we truly understand what is important. The fruits of penance directed towards the soul are attainable in this very life." Bhishma paused, surveying the landscape of Yudhishthira's mind. When one reflects properly, he continued, one comes to see that the things of this world are as fleeting as a summer breeze. Attachment to them is like grasping at sand. It only leads to suffering. The wise man knows that every living being is connected and that separation from loved ones is inevitable. We must not grieve for what we cannot control. Yudhishthira's eyes widened with curiosity as Bhishma began to tell an ancient tale of a king named Senajit who had lost his son. A wise Brahmana came to the king's court and spoke words that would change the monarch's life forever. Why is it learned one? Senajit asked. What is this intelligence, this penance, this concentration of mind? What knowledge and learning can bring a man? Peace. Of Brahmana smiled, his eyes shining with compassion. My child, he said, I do not regard even my own self as mine. I see the world as one vast interconnected web. Grief cannot touch me when I understand that all beings are like two pieces of wood on a river. They come together and then separate again. Yudhishthira listened interested as Vishwa continued to speak of the Brahmana's words. The joys and sorrows of human life are like a wheel. He said, after happiness comes sorrow, and after sorrow comes happiness. We must learn to let go of attachment to both. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Yudhishthira felt his heart expanding with understanding. He realized that true happiness lay not in external circumstances, but within, in the stillness of the mind. Bhishma's words hung in the air like a gentle breeze on a summer day. The wise man knows that everything is dependent upon destiny. He said, we must learn to endure both joy and sorrow with an unconquered heart. As Yudhishthira, in a world where time is fleeting and destructive, Yudhishthira sought guidance from his grandsire. Vishwa, time, which ravages all created things, is passing on. He said, tell me, O grandsire, what good thing should I seek? Bhishma replied that an ancient narrative came to mind, one of a devoted father and son who had a profound conversation about the nature of life. A story began with a Brahmana who was deeply learned in the Vedas and had a wise and intelligent son named Madhavan. One day Madhavan approached his father, who was still immersed in his studies. What should a wise man do, O father? Madhavan asked, seeing that human life is so fleeting. Tell me the course of duties one should perform without omitting to mention their fruits. The father, well versed in the ways of the world, smiled and began to explain. First, he said, one must observe the Brahmacharya mode of life, studying the Vedas with dedication. Then one should wish for children to rescue his ancestors from the cycle of birth and death. Next, setting up fire, one should perform the prescribed sacrifices according to due rites. Finally, one should enter the forest, devoting oneself to contemplation. Madhavan listened intently, but then he became agitated when the world is thus surrounded on all sides and assailed. He exclaimed, and when such irresistible things of fatal consequences fall upon it, how can you say these words so calmly? The father looked at his son with a curious expression. How is the world assailed? What surrounds it, and what are those irresistible things that come and go? Madhavan's passion grew as he explained that death was the ultimate assailant, decrepitude, the constant companion of human life. He spoke of how each night brings us closer to our own mortality, and how wisdom demands that we cover ourselves with the garb of knowledge. When death is approaching steadily, he said, who can feel happy like a fish in shallow water? His father listened attentively, his expression growing more thoughtful. The son's words were laced with urgency, as if warning his father to seize the day and accomplish what was for his good. Death drags its victims before their acts are accomplished. He said, the acts of tomorrow should be done today, those of the afternoon and the forenoon. His father listened, his eyes filled with a deep understanding. Madhavan continued speaking of how life is transitory and how one must practice virtue to achieve fame here and felicity hereafter. He spoke of the dangers of attachment, how it binds us like a cord that cannot be broken except by truthfulness. He who never injures living creatures, he said, is never injured by such agencies as are destructive of life and property. The sun was setting over the kingdom, casting a warm orange glow over the bustling streets of Hastinapur. Yudhishthira, the wise and just king, sound his throne deep in thought. He turned to his venerable grandfather Bhishma and asked, tell me, dear grandsire, what is the source of happiness and misery for those who are rich and poor alike? How do their practices and rituals shape their lives? Bhishma's eyes sparkled as he began to recount an ancient tale. In days gone by, he said, I met a Brahmana who had found peace and liberation through his devotion to the path of renunciation. He sang these verses to me. From the moment we are born on this earth, diverse kinds of sorrow and happiness befall us. If we attribute them to fate, we should neither rejoice at good fortune nor lament at misfortune. The Brahmana's words hung in the air like a challenge. Bhishma Continued, he told me that even with a mind free from desire, one still carries a heavy burden. We strive for our highest good, but often fail to control our minds. The true path to happiness lies in renouncing worldly possessions and desires. As Bhishma spoke, his words painted vivid pictures in Yudhishthira's mind. He imagined the Brahmana, weary of life's troubles, abandoning all attachments and living simply on the earth. He said that a person who is free from desire sleeps peacefully and wakes up to a new day filled with joy. Bhishma explained. Yudhishthira's curiosity grew. What does this mean, dear grandsire? He asked. Bhishma's eyes twinkled as he replied, It means that true happiness lies not in wealth or power, but in living a simple life unencumbered by desires and attachments. I weighed poverty against sovereignty on the scales of wisdom, and poverty proved heavier with greater merits. The king's thoughts turned to his own life. He had known both wealth and poverty, and he wondered which was truly better. Bhishma continued. A sovereign burdened by anxiety and surrounded by threats is like a deer trapped in the jaws of death. But the poor man, free from attachment and desires, roams the earth with ease. His heart filled with peace he is. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting the kingdom in a soft twilight glow. Vishwa's words concluded with a warning. Prosperity can be a curse, clouding one's judgment like autumnal clouds driven by the wind. It intoxicates us with pride and makes us forget our true nature. He paused, his eyes locked on Yudhishthira. The Brahmana said that we should renounce all worldly attachments and desires to achieve true happiness. Vishwa declared, without renunciation, we are in the midst of a grand assembly. Yudhishthira, the wise and just king, posed a question to Bhishma, the venerable sage. If one desires to perform acts of charity and sacrifice, but lacks the wealth to do so, what path should they follow to attain happiness? Bhishma's eyes sparkled as he began to speak. True happiness lies not in accumulating wealth or possessions, he said, his voice gentle yet firm. It is found in one who regards all experiences, joy and sorrow, honor and insult, with an equal eye, one who cultivates truthfulness of speech, freedom from attachment and the desire for no action whatsoever. Bhishma's words hung in the air like a promise. As he spoke, he recalled an ancient tale of Mankai, a man who had once been consumed by his desire for wealth. Mankai had tried every means to acquire riches, Bhishma said, but fate was against him. He bought 2 young bulls, but they were swept away by a strong camel, leaving Mankai heartbroken. The assembly listened intently as Bhishma continued. Mankai realized that his desire for wealth was futile, and that even the most determined efforts could not guarantee success. It was then that he understood the importance of renouncing attachment to worldly possessions. One who casts off all desires is superior to one who achieves their goals. Bhishma declared. As the assembly pondered these words, Mankai's own voice echoed in their minds. I have repeatedly been deceived by my desire for wealth, he said, his voice filled with regret. Why do I not free myself from attachments? He lamented, my soul is possessed by cupidity, and I am a slave to it. When Bhishma's words were like a gentle breeze that rustled the leaves of Mankai's heart. You have lost your wealth repeatedly, he said, and yet you still cling to it. Why do you not seek liberation from desire? The assembly watched as Mankai's face transformed, his eyes shining with newfound understanding. I am now awakened, Mankai declared, his voice filled with conviction. I see that my desire for wealth is a source of suffering. I will renounce all attachments and follow the path of goodness. As he spoke, his body seemed to expand, filling with a sense of freedom and peace. The assembly listened in awe as Bhishma continued to speak. Desire is like a fire that burns within us, he said. It cannot be satiated, and it brings only sorrow. One who casts off desire is free from all suffering. The words hung in the air, a challenge to all who heard them. Yudhishthira's eyes shone with tears. As he listened to Bhishma's words, he knew that he had been consumed by his own desires, and that it was. The venerable Bhishma continued to narrate a tale that had been passed down through generations. He spoke of Janak, the wise and tranquil ruler of Mitha, who possessed an unwavering sense of detachment. My wealth is boundless, Janaka would say, and yet I own nothing. Not even my kingdom's riches can compare to the freedom from attachment that I have achieved. Bhishma's eyes sparkled as he transitioned into a story about Ayatai, the son of Nahashav, who sought guidance from the revered Sijbadaya. Yet I had heard tales of Vadaya's remarkable tranquility and his ability to navigate the world without being swayed by desires or attachments. The young prince approached Vadaya with humility and curiosity, asking for instructions on how to attain such a state of Vadaya. Wise beyond measure listened attentively before responding. He explained that he did not instruct others, but rather followed the guidance of his 6 revered teachers, Pingala, the osprey, the snake, the bee in the forest, the maker of shafts, and the maiden with the anklet made of seashells on her right. You may catch their spirit. By reflection, Vadaya said. Gently, Vishwa's voice took on a soothing quality as he continued to narrate Vadaya's teachings. He spoke of Pingala, who slept peacefully without attachment or expectation. The osprey, too, had found tranquility by abstaining from the desires that drove others to destroy him. A snake, content in another creature's abode, lived in harmony with its surroundings. The bee, flitting from flower to flower, gathered nectar without attachment or sorrow. The maker of shafts, absorbed in his work, was oblivious to the world around him, and Vadaya himself wandered alone like the anklet on the maiden's right, unencumbered by the burdens of expectation. Vishwa's eyes seemed to cloud over as he spoke of hope, which can be a powerful force that agitates the heart. Freedom from hope is true happiness, he said softly. He paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle upon Yudhishthira and those listening. As Bhishma finished his tale, the assembly was enveloped in a profound silence. The wise old warrior's words had awakened a deep longing for detachment within their hearts. They sat in contemplative stillness, reflecting on the wisdom shared by Vadaya and the tranquil Janaka. In that moment, they knew that true happiness lay not in material wealth or external success, but in the freedom from attachment that came with living in harmony with the world around them. In the midst of a tranquil forest, King Prahlada, renowned for his wisdom and intelligence, encountered a wandering Brahmana who embodied the very essence of serenity. Prahlada, intrigued by the Brahmana's era, approached him with reverence and asked, Tell me, O wise one, how do you live in this world free from grief? What conduct should one follow to attain the excellent? And the Brahmana, with a gentle smile, began his tale of wisdom. He explained that he had transcended the limitations of human desires, living like a child untainted by attachment or aversion. I am indifferent to all worldly pursuits, he said, and observe neither joy nor sorrow, for I have come to understand that life is but a fleeting moment, and that all things are subject to decay and death. Prahlada was fascinated by the Brahmana's words and asked him to reveal the secret of his wisdom. The Brahmana began to speak of the Ajigara, vow, a way of living that had been passed down through generations of sages. This vow, he said, is one of detachment, of freedom from fear, cupidity, foolishness, and wrath. It is a path that acknowledges the inevitability of death and decay and seeks to transcend them by living in harmony with nature. As the Brahmana spoke, his words were like a gentle breeze on a summer day, soothing and calming Prahlada's soul. He explained how under this vow one would not covet wealth or status, nor would they be distressed by loss or poverty. They would live simply, without attachment to material possessions or worldly desires. Prahlada was deeply moved by the Brahmana's words and asked him to elaborate on the Ajigara vow. The Brahmana smiled and said, It is a path that recognizes the impermanence of all things, including wealth and pleasure. It is a way of living that is guided by wisdom, intelligence, and understanding rather than by attachment or desire. The sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the forest. Prahlada asked the Brahmana to tell him more about this vow. The Brahmana continued, One who follows this path would not be swayed by the whims of their heart, nor would they strive for objects that are difficult to acquire or fleeting in nature. They would live with a pure heart, free from fear and attachment, and guided by the principles of truth and purity. As Prahlada listened to the Brahmana's words, he felt his own heart expanding with compassion and understanding. He realized that this vow was not just a way of living, but a path to true happiness and inner peace. And so, with a sense of gratitude and reverence, Prahlada thanked the Brahmana for sharing his wisdom and vowed to follow in his footsteps. As the night fell, casting a dark veil over the forest, in the midst of a bustling kingdom, Yudhishthira, the wise prince, sought the counsel of his revered grandsire, Bhishma. With sincerity in his voice, he asked, Which is more valuable to a person, O grandsire? Kinsman, axe, wealth, or wisdom? Bhishma's eyes twinkled with ancient knowledge as he began to weave a tale from the depths of time. Wisdom, my dear Yudhishthira, he said, is the highest acquisition in this world. It is the key to felicity and the ultimate goal of human existence. He paused, collecting his
But before continuing to illustrate his point, Bhishma recounted an ancient story about a prosperous Vaisya who carelessly drove over Kasyapa, a young rishi devoted to penances. The youth lay on the ground writhing in pain and anguish. Indra, disguised as a jackal, appeared beside him and spoke words of wisdom. Kasyapa, you are a human being blessed with a precious life among humans. You are a Brahmana revered for your knowledge and devotion to the Vedas. You have acquired something truly remarkable. Wisdom. It is foolish to abandon this gift, no matter how difficult it may be to attain. Indra's words dripped with compassion as he gazed at Kasyapa. As the jackal continued to speak, his words became a gentle rebuke. You are not like those creatures who lack hands and suffer greatly. You have been blessed with this precious gift. Be content, O Brahmana, for you possess something truly valuable. Indra's eyes sparkled as he emphasized each point of the story, unfolded, further revealing the transience of human desires and the futility of seeking happiness through material possessions or social status. Human beings, Bhishma said, are forever chasing after wealth, sovereignty, and even godhood. But true contentment lies not in these fleeting acquisitions. Bhishma's words were like a gentle breeze on a summer day, soothing Yudhishthira's troubled mind. He spoke of the impermanence of all things, how even the most desirable objects can never truly satisfy our deepest longings. As the tale came to an end, Bhishma offered Kasyapa, and indeed Yudhishthira, a profound message. Do not be swayed by your desires or blinded by your senses. Instead, cultivate wisdom, and you will find true happiness. With these words, Bhishma's story concluded, leaving Yudhishthira to ponder the timeless wisdom that had been shared with him. The kingdom fell silent as Yudhishthira absorbed the teachings of his grandsire. The prince knew that he had been given a precious gift, the understanding that true happiness lies not in external possessions or fleeting desires, but in. The sun had set over the rolling hills of Hastinapura, casting a warm orange glow over the assembly gathered around Yudhishthira, the eldest of the Pandavas. The prince's eyes shone with curiosity as he turned to his venerable grandsire, Bhishma, and asked, Tell me, O revered one, if gifts, sacrifices, penances, and dutiful services returned to preceptors are productive of wisdom and high felicity. Bhishma's wise eyes seemed to bore into the very soul of Yudhishthira as he began to speak. My child, when the mind is clouded by desire, wrath, and other evil passions, it leads us down a path of sin, and if our actions are tainted by sin, we are doomed to dwell in realms of suffering. The wicked take birth in poverty-stricken circumstances, repeatedly tormented by famine, woe, fear, and death. As Bhishma spoke, his words seemed to paint vivid pictures in the minds of those listening. But on the other hand, he continued, those who live virtuous lives guided by faith and self-control are born into affluence and enjoy life's pleasures and happiness. The unbelievers, with their arms bound, are sent to treacherous lands infested by ferocious beasts, snakes, and robbers. The assembly held its collective breath as Bhishma paused for a moment, his eyes scanning the faces of those gathered before him. And what of those who reverence the gods and guests, who are generous and fond of good men? They walk the path of virtue, their souls cleansed by acts of charity. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the assembly in a soft twilight, Bhishma's words took on a sense of urgency. My child, he said to Yudhishthira, the consequences of our actions follow us like shadows, whether we strive to leave them behind or not. Whatever acts we do, we must face their fruits. Death is the great leveler, dragging all creatures towards their destined fate. The assembly was silent for a moment, as if each individual was reflecting on the weight of Bhishma's words. Then the venerable warrior continued, just as flowers and fruits bloom in their own time without any external effort, so too do the consequences of our actions unfold according to their own schedule. After we have enjoyed or suffered the consequences of our past deeds, there is no longer any honor, disgrace, gain, or loss, for use as the stars began to twinkle in the night sky. Bhishma's words took on a note of hope. Even as a calf recognizes its mother among 1,000 cows, so too do the acts of our past life recognize and visit us in our next life. And just as a piece of cloth becomes clean after being washed, so too.
In the midst of a tranquil forest, Yudhishthira, the eldest of the Pandava brothers, sat in contemplative silence beside his revered grandsire Bhishma. The air was filled with the sweet, scent of blooming flowers, as Yudhishthira posed an age-old question that had long puzzled many a wise sage and philosopher grandsire. He said, "Tell me, from where did this vast universe arise, whose creation is it, and to whom does it return when destruction sets in? I wish to know the origin of all things, from the Essenes to the firmament, mountains, clouds, lands, fire, and wind. How were all objects created? And what is the nature of their existence?" Vishwa's eyes sparkled with a deep wisdom as he began his tale in this connection. "I shall recount an ancient narrative spoken by Vray to Bharadwaja." He said the setting shifted to a majestic peak where Bharadwaja stood before the radiant Rishi Vrayu, who sat atop Mount Kailasa like a deity. The air vibrated with the weight of knowledge as Bharadwaja asked his questions. "Great Rishi, by whom was this world created? How were all creatures born? What is the source of their purity and impurity, and the ordinances governing virtue?" And Vaisavriya's voice boomed like thunder. Yet it was laced with an otherworldly calm. "There exists a primeval being known as Manasa, who has no beginning or end," he declared. "He is unmanifest, eternal, undecaying, and unchangeable. Through him all creatures are born and die. He first created a divine being named Mahat, which in turn gave rise to consciousness." As Freyu's words unfolded like a tapestry of creation, the very fabric of existence began to reveal itself. "Consciousness created space," he continued, "and from space was born water. From water emerged fire and wind, which combined to form the earth. Self-born Manasa then created a divine lotus pregnant with energy. From this sacred lotus sprang Brahman, that Essene Veda, who proclaimed upon his birth, 'I am he.' Thus he became known as consciousness, encompassing all created things within himself, then governing them through his will." The narrative shifted once more as Bharadwaja posed a new question to Pri. "Tell me, great Rishi, what is the extent of the firmament, points of the horizon, surface of this earth, and wind? What lies beyond their limits?" Freyu's eyes twinkled with an otherworldly wisdom as he replied, "The sky above is infinite abode of sages and divine beings. Its limits are unknown even to the gods. Beyond the lion lie oceans of water."
In a lush valley nestled at the foot of Meru, the majestic mountain, Bharadwaja, a wise and revered Brahmana, sat in contemplative silence. His eyes sparkled with curiosity as he turned to Prig, the esteemed sage, and asked, "Tell me, O best of Brahmanas, how did the puissant Brahman residing within Meru create these diverse kinds of objects?" The air was heavy with anticipation as Bharadwaja awaited Frigu's response. Of Frigu, his eyes closed in deep thought, began to speak in a voice that resonated like a gentle breeze. "The great Manasa, in his form of Brahman, created the diverse kinds of objects by fight of wool for the protection. Then of all creatures, he first created water." As Frigu spoke, the atmosphere seemed to change, as if the very essence of life was being revealed. He continued, "Water is the life of all creatures, and it is water which shades their growth. If there be no water, all creatures would perish. The whole universe is pervaded by water." Bharadwaja's eyes widened with wonder as he listened to Frigu's words. He asked, "How did water spring into existence? How fire and wind, and how also was the earth created?" His questions hung in the air like a challenge waiting for Frigu to unravel the mysteries of creation. Frigu's expression turned contemplative as he began to weave a tale from ancient times. In very ancient times, during the Brahma Kalpa, a high-souled rishis of the regenerate order gathered together, feeling this very doubt about the creation of the universe. The air grew thick with anticipation as Frigu described how these wise sages restrained their speech and remained immovable, engaged in deep contemplation. They gave up all food, subsisting on air alone. For 1,000 celestial years, the ages passed. A celestial voice echoed through the firmament, saying, "Formerly there was only infinite space, perfectly motionless and immovable, without sun, moon, stars, and wind. It seemed to be asleep." The voice continued, "Then Mars sprang into existence like something darker within darkness. Then from the pressure of water rose wind." As Frey spoke, the scene unfolded like a painting, an empty vessel without a hole filled with water, air appearing and making a great noise. A wind generated by the pressure of the Essene of water still moved through space. Its motion never stopped coming into unobstructed space. It created friction with water and fire sprang into existence, blazing with great might and energy. Flames directed upwards dispelled the darkness that had covered space, assisted by the wind. Fire drew space and water together. Frigu's words painted the vivid picture of creation, fire combining with wind too. In the sacred halls of ancient wisdom, Bharadwaja, a sage renowned for his piercing intellect, posed a profound question to Prithu, another esteemed seer. Well, why, he asked, do we attribute the name great creatures exclusively to the 5 elements, space, air, fire, water, and earth, which are mere manifestations of the universe's vast expanse? Of Prithu, with his deep understanding of the cosmos, replied, all things that belong to the infinite or the vast receive the appellation of great. It is for this reason that these 5 elements have come to be called great creatures. He then proceeded to explain the nature of each element and its role in the creation of all living beings' activity. Prithu said, is wind. The sound that we hear is space. The heat within us is fire. The liquid juices occurring in our bodies are water, and the solidified matter, flesh and bones, are earth. He went on to describe how these 5 elements combine to form the bodies of living creatures, each with its own equal proportions. Bharadwaja, however, was not convinced. If all mobile and immobile objects be composed of these 5 elements, he asked, why is it that in all immobile objects those elements are not visible? He cited the example of trees, which do not appear to have any heat, motion, or other qualities associated with the 5 elements. Prithu smiled knowingly, without doubt. The possessed of density trees have space within them. He said, the putting forth of flowers and fruits is always taking place in them. They have heat within them, in consequence of which leaf, bark, fruit, and flower droop and dry up. He pointed out that trees also possess the ability to perceive touch, as evidenced by their response to external stimuli. Continued, trees recover vigor and put forth flowers in consequence of waters, good and bad. It is plain that trees have scent. They drink water by their roots and catch diseases of diverse kinds. Those diseases again are cured by different operations. He concluded that trees have perceptions of taste, as they can respond to various flavors. Bharadwaja was struck by the depth of Prithu's wisdom, as one can suck up water through a bent lotus stalk. He said trees also, with the aid of the wind, drink through their roots. He acknowledged that trees are susceptible to pleasure and pain, grow and cut or lopped off, and have life within them. Prithu then delved into the intricacies of the 5 elements in living beings in each body. He said, the proportions of the 5 elements differ. It is in consequence of these 5 elements that mobile objects can move their bodies. He explained how the skin, flesh, bones, marrow, and arteries and veins are made of earth energy. In the midst of a profound discussion on the mysteries of the human body, Sage Bharadwaja posed a question to his esteemed companion, Sage Prithu. Tell me, dear Prithu, he said with curiosity, how does bodily fire or heat reside within us, and how does the wind obtaining space for itself cause our bodies to move and exert themselves? Sage Prithu's eyes lit up as he began to unravel the intricacies of the human physiology. Noble Bharadwaja, he said with a gentle smile, I shall reveal to you the secrets of the wind's movement and its role in animating our bodies. He paused for a moment, collecting his thoughts before continuing. Within the head there resides a fiery force that protects the body from perishing. This heat is the essence of life, and it is with this heat that the prana, or breath, residing within the head causes all kinds of exertion. The prana is not just a simple breath. It is the living creature itself, the universal soul, eternal being, mind, intellect, and consciousness of all living beings, as well as the senses themselves. As Sage Prithu spoke, his words painted vivid images in Bharadwaja's mind. He saw how the prana flowed through every part of the body, animating it with life force. And what of the other breaths? Bharadwaja asked his curiosity. Sage Prithu nodded. Yes, the samana breath governs each of the senses, making them act in their respective ways. The apana breath, meanwhile, moves through the heat that resides in the urethra and abdominal intestines, carrying out waste and maintaining balance within the body. He paused for a moment before continuing. Theuna breath operates in 3 areas: the heart, the navel, and the joints of our bodies, and it is this very breath that allows us to move about with ease. The vena, breath resides in all the joints, circulating heat throughout the system, operating on the various elementary substances and bad humors within. Thus Bharadwaja listened intently as sage Prithu revealed the intricate dance of the 5 primary breaths. Pranasamana, Apana, and Vena. He saw how they intermingled and interacted with one another, creating a harmonious balance that sustained life. The discussion drew to a close. Sage Prithu spoke of the heat within the body, which he called Ashman. This is the fire that burns within us, he said, his voice filled with reverence. It is this very heat that causes digestion in all creatures possessed of bodies. He explained how the prana, breath, descended to the extremity of the anal canal, and then ascended once more, bringing life force. In a quiet corner of the forest, Bharadwaja sat beneath the shade of an ancient tree, pondering the mysteries of life and death. He gazed out at the wind rustling through the leaves, its gentle caress, a reminder of the delicate balance between existence and non-existence. As he sat there, his mind began to wander down the path of inquiry. If it is indeed the wind that sustains us, he mused aloud, if it is the wind that stirs our limbs and fuels our passions, then what does this say about the value of life itself? He paused, lost in thought, as the tree swayed gently above him. Bharadwaja's eyes drifted to a nearby flame dancing on the tip of a stick. And if the animal heat within us is akin to fire, he mused, if it is this very fire that breaks down our food and sustains us, then what significance does life hold? He watched intently as the flame flickered and died, its warmth vanishing into the air as the sun began to set, casting a warm orange glow across the forest floor. Bharadwaja's thoughts turned to the nature of life itself. When an animal dies, he mused, its vital breath departs, and the internal heat is extinguished. But where does this life go? Is it not simply lost in the vast expanse of the external air? He pondered this question, his eyes scanning the horizon as if searching for some answer hidden beyond the trees. As night began to fall, Bharadwaja's thoughts turned to the cow that had been given away to a holy Brahmana. This animal, he mused, is said to be able to rescue me in the afterlife. But what of its own fate? Does it not also die just as we do? He shook his head, puzzled by this paradox, as the stars began to twinkle above. Bharadwaja's thoughts turned to the cycle of birth and death that governed all living things. The root of a tree may be cut down, he mused, but from its seeds new life springs forth. Where is it then that we go after we died? Is it not simply into the great sea of air, or perhaps into some other form, just as water merges with the ocean? He sat in silence for a moment, lost in contemplation. Finally, he spoke aloud to the forest itself, his voice carrying on the wind. All this universe is born from seeds, and all living things are but temporary manifestations of those seeds. When we die, do we not simply return to our original state, awaiting rebirth into some new form? The trees stood silently around him, their leaves rustling softly in agreement. As the night wore on, Bharadwaja's thoughts grew quiet, his mind at peace with it. In a tranquil setting, surrounded by nature's splendor, free, a wise sage shared his profound understanding with Bharadwaja. Another revered Rishi. There is no destruction of the living creature, he said, his voice filled with conviction. The body may dissolve, but the living entity, though dependent on it, remains unchanged. He drew an analogy with fire, explaining that just as flames disappear when their fuel is consumed, yet the heat and energy persist in the surrounding space. Bharadwaja listened attentively, his eyes sparkling with curiosity. But revered Gray, he countered, if there's no destruction of the living creature like that of fire, then shouldn't we say that fire itself becomes annihilated when its fuel is depleted? The air was filled with anticipation as the two sages engaged in a dialectical dance. Prithu smiled knowingly. You are correct, my friend, but consider this. Just as fire merges with space after consuming its fuel, so too does the living entity blend into the vast expanse when it leaves the physical body. He paused, allowing his words to sink deeply into Bharadwaja's mind. Bharadwaja pressed on, seeking clarity. But what of the indications of life within a being? What is this living agent that animates our bodies? His voice trembled with eagerness as he asked, if life itself cannot be seen when the body dissolves, who or what feels pain and pleasure? Prithu's eyes gleamed with compassion. The mind, too, is composed of the 5 elements, just like the body, he explained gently. However, there exists an internal soul that sustains our bodies, governing our perceptions, emotions, and actions. He paused, lulling his words to resonate within Bharadwaja's heart as soul, for he continued as the witness of all our experiences, the one who feels pleasure and pain, and when separated from it, the body loses its vitality. This soul is none other than Brahman, the Creator existing in all things. His voice rose with reverence as he spoke of the Supreme. Soul's universal benevolence sees the sun dip below the horizon, casting a warm orange glow over the landscape. He concluded his discourse. The living agent, he said, is not subject to destruction, for it merely migrates from one body to another. Unseen and unnoticed by others, his words hung in the air like a promise as Bharadwaja listened intently. His heart, filled with wonder in the stillness of that evening, Freya's words became a beacon of understanding, illuminating the mysteries of life and death. As the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, the two sages sat in contemplative silence, their minds expanded by the profound teachings they had shared. In the beginning, Dhriyu, a sage of great wisdom, stood before King Bharadwaja and began to recount the tale of creation. Brahman, he said, the Supreme Being first created a few Brahmanas who were destined to be known as Prajapatis, or lords of creation. These beings shone with a splendor equal to that of the fire or the sun, for they were born from the very essence of the firstborn being. As Prithu spoke, his words seemed to transport King Bharadwaja to a realm beyond time and space. He saw how Brahman had created not only these noble beings, but also the eternal Vedas, which held the secrets of creation within their sacred verses: truth, duty, penance. All the fundamental principles that govern the universe were born from the same divine energy. Prithu continued his tale, weaving a rich tapestry of creation: the deities and the Danavas, the Gandharvas and the Daityas, the great snakes and the Yachas, the Rakshasas and the serpents. All these beings emerged from the primeval essence of Brahman, and then, as if to complete the grand symphony, human beings were created, divided into four orders: Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaisyas, and Sudras. But King Bharadwaja was not convinced by Prithu's words. If the distinction between these four orders is based solely on color, he said, then it seems that all have been mingled together. He pointed out the commonalities that united all men: lust, wrath, fear, cupidity, grief, anxiety. All these emotions afflicted every human being, regardless of their station in life. Prithu listened attentively to King Bharadwaja's words and then responded with a gentle smile. You are right, my king, he said. There is no inherent distinction between the different orders. Men have been created equal by Brahman, but through their actions they have become distributed into various castes. He explained how those who were fond of indulging in desire and pleasure with attributes of severity and wrath became Kshatriyas, while those who were attached to both goodness and passion, taking up professions like cattle rearing and agriculture, became Vaisyas. As Prithu spoke, the threads of creation seemed to unravel before King Bharadwaja's eyes. He saw how men had fallen away from their original order due to cupidity, ignorance, and a lack of understanding. Those who were unable to grasp the conception of Brahman as the Supreme Being became members of inferior orders: Isakas, Rakshasas, Pritas, and Mlechas. But Prithu's tale did not end on a note of despair. He spoke of the great rishis who had created men. In the sacred halls of ancient wisdom, Bharadwaja, a revered sage, sought the counsel of Threyu, a master of spiritual knowledge with a humble heart. Bharadwaja asked, O best of regenerate ones, by what acts does one become a Brahmana? By what a Kshatriya? Oh, tell me this: how does one become a Vaisya or a Sudra? Prithu's eyes sparkled with the weight of ancient tradition as he began to speak. A Brahmana is one who has been sanctified by sacred rites and pure in behavior. He studies the Vedas with devotion, observes the 6 well-known acts of ablutions, silent recitation of mantras, pouring libations on the sacrificial fire, worshipping deities, offering food to guests, and making offerings to the visitor. As his heart is filled with reverence for his preceptor, and he is always devoted to vows and truth. As Prithu spoke, the air was filled with an air of simplicity and humility. A Kshatriya,
He continued as one who engages in battle studies. The Vedas makes gifts to Brahmanas, and takes wealth from those he protects. A Vaisya is one who earns fame through the care of cattle, agriculture, and acquiring wealth, while a Sudra is one who delights in every kind of food, does every kind of work, and has impure behavior. Bharadwaja listened intently, his mind absorbing the nuances of each description. He knew that true character was not defined by birth or social status, but by actions and intentions. Fritter's words echoed with a deep wisdom. If these characteristics be observable in a Sudra, and if they be not found in a Brahmana, then such a Sudra is no Sudra, and such a Brahmana is no Brahmanas. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the gathering. Fritter's tone turned. Serious cupidity and wrath must be restrained by every means. Self-restraint is the highest result of knowledge. One should always protect one's prosperity from one's wrath, one's penances from pride, one's knowledge from honor and disgrace, and one's soul from error. Bharadwaja's eyes shone with a deep understanding as he listened to Fritter's words. He knew that the path of renunciation was not an easy one, but it was the key to true liberation. That intelligent person, Fritter said, who does all acts without desire of fruit, whose whole wealth exists for charity, and who performs the daily Homa, is a real rhinoceros. The night deep in the air grew quiet with contemplation. Fritter's words hung in the stillness. Like a gentle breeze on a summer evening, one should conduct oneself. In the ancient wisdom of the Vedas, Prayu, a revered sage stood before Bharadwaja and his fellow seekers of truth. With eyes aglow like embers from a sacred fire, Prayu began to speak of the fundamental nature of existence. That truth is Brahma. He declared the very essence that gives rise to all creatures. It is truth that sustains the universe, upholds its grand tapestry, and guides those who seek the realms of heaven. Untruth, on the other hand, is but a veil of darkness that leads downward, shrouding the light of knowledge from those who succumb to it. As Fritter spoke, his words wove a rich fabric of understanding, illuminating the intricate web of righteousness and unrighteousness, light and darkness, pleasure and pain. Truth is righteousness, he continued, and righteousness is light. It is through this union that one attains true happiness. Conversely, untruth was revealed as the source of sorrow, a manifestation of darkness that brings only misery. Bharadwaja listened intently, his mind questioning the sage's assertions. You say that happiness is the ultimate goal. He said, yet we hear of the creator Brahman who lives in solitude, detached from worldly desires, and what of the divine master Shiva, who vanquished Kama, the god of desire? Does this not suggest that true wisdom lies beyond the pursuit of happiness? Fritter smiled knowingly, his eyes twinkling with the depth of ancient knowledge. It is said that those who are overwhelmed by darkness pursue only unrighteousness, never attaining happiness in this life or the next. They suffer from various afflictions, disease, pain, trouble, and ultimately death itself. As Fritter's words painted a vivid picture of the consequences of untruth, Bharadwaja's understanding began to unfold like a lotus blooming in the morning sun. In heaven, the sage continued, there is no hunger, no thirst, no decrepitude, and no sin. It is a realm where delicious breezes blow and perpetual fragrance fills the air. With these words, Fritter revealed the fundamental truth that underlies all existence, that happiness is not merely a fleeting pleasure, but an attribute of the soul itself. The earth, he said, is the progenitrix of all creatures, and females partake of her nature. The male animal is like Prajapati himself, embodying the creative energy that sustains life. The seekers of truth listened in rapt attention. Fritter's words illuminated the path to understanding, guiding them toward a profound realization that each individual, shaped by their own actions, may attain either happiness or misery, and so with an open heart and mind one may embark on the journey of self-discovery.
In a tranquil setting surrounded by the serenity of nature, Bharadwaja sat in deep contemplation, seeking guidance on the path to righteousness. He posed a series of questions to Prem, a wise sage renowned for his profound understanding of the ancient traditions. What is the consequence of gift-giving? Bharadwaja asked, his eyes wide with curiosity. How does it impact our lives in this world? And the next Praetor's face lit up with a warm smile as he began to explain the significance of charity by offering libations to the sacred fire. He said, "We purify ourselves from the stains of sin. The study of the Vedas brings us blessed tranquility, while gifts to those in need bring joy and pleasure. Penances performed with dedication and devotion lead us to the realm of heaven." Bharadwaja's eyes sparkled with interest as Pri continued. "Gifts are of two kinds, those that benefit our souls in the afterlife, and those that bring happiness to ourselves and others in this world. The consequences of gifts are directly proportional to their magnitude entrained by the complexities of karma." Bharadwaja asked for further insight into the duties and responsibilities of individuals. What course of action should each person follow? He inquired. His response was clear and concise. Those who adhere to the path laid out for them shall attain heaven as their reward. Those who stray from this path will succumb to folly. As their conversation flowed like a gentle stream, Bharadwaja asked about the four modes of life that had been ordained by the divine Brahman in ancient times. Prahu's eyes shone with wisdom as he recounted the history of these sacred paths. "In days of yore," Prahu began, "the divine Brahman revealed to us four modes of life: the life of a student, the household of the forest dweller, and the renouncer. Each path has its own set of duties and responsibilities." Bharadwaja listened intently as Prahu described each mode in detail. For those living in the abode of their preceptor, purity of conduct, Vedic rites, restraints, and vows were essential. In this mode one should worship the morning and evening two lights, the sun and the sacred fire. The domestic mode of life is a path that suits all. Prahu continued, "Those who have completed their studies in the preceptor's abode return home to live with their spouses, cultivating virtue, wealth, and pleasure. In this mode one should acquire wealth through virtuous means, such as reciting the Vedas or living off the land like the rishis." Bharadwaja listened with rapt attention as Prahu explained the third mode of life, the forest life. Those who roamed it
in a distant land, a revered sage named Prahu imparted ancient wisdom to his esteemed disciple Bharadwaja. Prahu spoke with unwavering conviction about the path to righteousness and spiritual liberation. He began by describing the ascetic forest dwellers who sought virtue. Through rigorous penance, these recluses would venture into secluded woods, where they would subsist solely on wild herbs, fruits, and roots. They would lie upon the bare earth or rocks, covering their limbs with grass and animal skins. Unshaven and unpampered, they would perform their ablutions at regular intervals, pouring libations onto the ground and sacred fire. Their daily routine was marked by tireless effort as they gathered sacred fuel for their homa fires and swept clean their sacrificial altars. Their skin cracked from exposure to extreme temperatures and their bodies emaciated from self-mortification. These ascetics embodied unwavering patience and fortitude. They lived in accordance with the dictates of the regenerate rishis, burning away their sins like fire and attaining regions of felicity that were difficult to achieve. Prahu then spoke about the Parivrajkas, wandering mendicants who renounced worldly attachments and pleasures. Free from attachment to sacred fires, wealth, and loved ones, they roamed freely, regarding a clump of earth or gold with equal indifference. They never injured living creatures, immobile things, or animals born from filth or eggs. Their abodes were hills, mountains, river banks, or tree shades. Wherever they found shelter in towns, the Parivrajkas would reside for no more than 5 nights in villages. Their stay was limited to a single night. They would seek sustenance only at the homes of Brahmanas renowned for their virtue and generosity. The mendicants' vow of taciturnity allowed them to wander freely without causing fear or inspiring fear from others. Prahu revealed that those who observed this mode of life, with its emphasis on self-control and detachment, would attain numerous regions of felicity. A person of regenerate birth, endowed with a pure heart and an understanding freed from resolution, would ultimately achieve emancipation, attaining Brahma through the tranquil flame of their own inner fire. Bharadwaja, filled with curiosity, asked Prahu to describe the region beyond their known world. Prahu spoke of a sacred realm situated towards the north, beyond the majestic Himalayas. This land was inhabited by righteous men and women who lived in harmony, free from afflictions and desires for others' possessed. Their existence was marked by simplicity, contentment, and self-sufficiency. Some resided in opulent palaces, surrounded by every comfort, while others chose a more austere path, eating sparingly to maintain their physical and spiritual well-being. The inhabitants of this realm cherished each other's company, engaging in acts of.
The sun had just begun to rise over the horizon, casting a warm glow over the tranquil landscape. Yudhishthira, the eldest of the Pandava brothers, sat at the feet of Bhishma, his revered grandsire, with reverence in his eyes. He asked, "O Venerable Bhishma, you who are well versed in the ways of duty and virtue, I seek your guidance on the path to righteousness." Bhishma's wise face smiled benevolently as he began to speak. "My dear Yudhishthira, those who walk the path of evil are marked by their wicked deeds, rash behavior, and impure understanding, but those who strive for goodness are distinguished by their pure conduct and noble practices." She continued, "It is essential to maintain personal hygiene and purity in all aspects of life. One should never answer nature's call on public roads, in cow-pens, or amidst fields overgrown with paddy after completing one's duties. It is customary to perform ablutions in a river and offer oblations of water to the deities. This is said to be the duty of all men." Bhishma emphasized the importance of worshipping Surya, the sun god. Every day one should not sleep after sunrise, he cautioned, and morning and evening prayers should be recited facing east and west respectively. He also stressed the significance of washing one's limbs before eating silently with one's face turned towards the east, and never disparaging the food that is to be eaten. In addition to these practices, Bhishma shared the wisdom of Narada Rishi, who said that good conduct is indicated by circumambulating sacred spots, bowls, sacred images, cup-pens, crossroads, pious brahmanas, and sacred trees. He also advised against making distinctions between guests, attendants, and kinsmen when it comes to food, as equality in this respect is highly applauded. Bhishma went on to explain the importance of following the ordinances of the gods, which dictate that one should eat twice a day, once at dawn and once at dusk. He who eats according to this rule acquires the merit of a fast. He said, at the hours ordained for Homal, one should pour libations on the sacred fires. Yudhishthira listened intently. Bhishma continued to share his wisdom. He emphasized the significance of seeking one's own wife in her season without the companionship of other people's wives, as this acquires the merit of brahmacharya. The remnants of a Brahman's dish are like ambrosia. He said they are like the lacteal sustenance yielded by the mother's breast. People highly prize those remnants. Bhishma also warned against the dangers of accumulating wealth and material possessions, saying that one who has abstained from meat.
The sun had just begun to set over the horizon, casting a warm orange glow over the assembly gathered around. Yudhishthira, the eldest of the Pandavas, known for his wisdom and curiosity, sat with his grandfather Bhishma, eager to learn about the mysteries of the universe. "Tell me, O grandsire," Yudhishthira asked, "what is this Adhyatma that you speak of? What is its nature, and how does it relate to every living being?" Bhishma, with his eyes closed in contemplation, began to weave a tale that would take the young prince on a journey through the very fabric of existence. Adhyatma, Bhishma explained, is the hidden truth about creation and destruction. It is the understanding of how this universe came into being and how it will eventually return to its source. Great teachers have spoken of this before, but I shall now reveal it to you. O son of Pritha, Bhishma began to describe the 5 great elements: earth, air, space, water, and light, which were said to be the building blocks of all creation. These elements, he explained, were not just physical substances, but also abstract concepts that govern the workings of the universe. The Supreme Soul, Bhishma continued, is the creator and destroyer of all things. It is like a great ocean that gives rise to waves, which in turn subside back into its depths. The living creature, however, is often unaware of this truth due to ignorance. Bhishma then delved deeper into the nature of the human experience, explaining how the senses and the mind interact with the world around them. He spoke of the 3 qualities that governed all actions: goodness, passion, and darkness. Goodness brings happiness, Bhishma said, while passion produces sorrow, and when these two combine with darkness, they lead to delusion and error. But, O Bharata, it is only through understanding this Adhyatma that one can attain true wisdom and peace. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Yudhishthira listened intently to Bhishma's words, his mind expanding with each new revelation. He began to see the universe in a different light, as a complex web of relationships between the five great elements, the Supreme Soul, and the human experience. Bhishma concluded his discourse by highlighting the distinction between intelligence and the soul. One puts forth qualities, he said, while the other remains unchanged like a date and a fig. They may be united, but remain distinct in their nature. As the assembly dispersed, Yudhishthira felt a sense of wonder and awe wash over him. He knew that he had been given a precious gift, the understanding of Adhyatma, which would guide him on his journey through life and beyond.
In the midst of the forested hermitage, Bhishma sat before Arjuna, his eyes shining with an inner light. As he began to speak of the ancient wisdom of yoga meditation, O son of Prithat, he said, I shall now reveal to you the secrets of the 4 kinds of yoga, which have been known to the great rishis for centuries as